Well, those are the thoughts of Kyle Busch when he remarked about the change to joining Richard Childress Racing. And I'm joined by the Athletics top writer when it comes to covering NASCAR, Jordan Bianchi. And Jordan and I spend a little time now and again filling in as hosts and substitute hosts on Sirius XM radio on the NASCAR channel. Jordan, what did you make of the announcement by Busch? It struck me as I was one of the 30,000 plus folks that linked in on live stream that it was a calm, almost, refreshing, different Kyle Busch that was giving us the news about joining RCR.
Yeah, I thought the clip you aired really kind of summarized it best. Like, this is a reset for Kyle Busch. It's 15 years at Joe Gibbs Racing. He's had a lot of success, right? 2 championships, 56 wins. And yeah, in some respects, this is a relationship you never really expected to come to an end. Like, you expected Kyle Busch to fulfill his career at Joe Gibbs Racing. That said, I think you can kind of look at it really these past few years, like something is missing from Kyle Busch. Something is missing from his team. And there's been some changes with crew chiefs, or there's been other personnel changes. And it just doesn't seem like Kyle is to that level that he needs to be at. He's only won 4 races since 2020. So kind of knowing this, it feels like a change might be a good thing, a fresh start, like he said, and go to an organization where I think really is going to welcome him for who he is, let him be him, embrace it. I think in a lot of respects, this is a good thing for Kyle, and I think this is a great thing for RCR.
Well, when Richard Childress addressed all of you media there at the NASCAR Hall of Fame, I wonder how many of you actually dropped your jaw, or maybe you expected it when he compared Kyle Busch to Dale Earnhardt Sr.
Yeah, I mean, it's the easy comparison to make, and I don't really like making it myself because I didn't cover Dale. I didn't know Dale, and I know about Dale, obviously. So it's hard to make. And there are some similarities probably between Kyle and Dale, and you can speak to that better than I could. So it makes sense. But I will say this, like, Richard Childress Racing is about racers. That's the quote unquote racers mentality. Racing first, we get it, down and gritty. You can say a lot of things about Kyle Busch, good or bad. At the end of the day, he is a racer, though.
Indeed.
He is somebody
Yeah.
who's not afraid to get dirt. He loves to go to the local tracks and race, whether it's with his son or himself. Like, he just fits in very well at RCR. And I do think while this relationship has the potential to go sideways, there are some big personalities involved here. I think it's going to be okay. Richard is good at about managing these big personalities and good at managing these kind of drivers. I think as long as the equipment meets Busch's standards and he feels like he can go out there and win races and maybe contend for a championship, I think this could do very well for both of them.
You worry, you say, that this could go sideways because of the big personalities. Yet, as you just said, Jordan,
yeah,
if there's a car owner that can handle big personalities, sure, because he handled the biggest one in the history, and that's Dale Sr., what do you think some of the alerts or the caution flags that we should look out for?
To me, the biggest thing is if next year RCR isn't to the level they're at now, and this year they've been really, really good. Tyler Reddick's got 2 wins. He could honestly probably have had 4 or 5 wins this year. They are very competitive consistently. But next year with this car, bigger teams, the JGRs, Hendricks, the Penske's, are going to have a full off season with this car to develop and push and prod and find the little nuances that separate the bigger teams from the middle-sized teams. And there's a worry or a concern, and it's realistic, that RCR won't be able to keep pace with that. And if next year or 2 years from now, RCR isn't winning races or capable of winning races, how is Kyle Busch going to handle that? And then how is RCR going to address that? Because the only way to properly address that is to give Kyle Busch faster cars, but they may not be able to. So it's a conundrum, and it's kind of a hypothetical in some sense, but it's also a very realistic scenario because Kyle Busch wants to win. He's not going to an organization to rebuild, or like Brad Keselowski is, or going somewhere new to start from the ground up, kind of like Tony Stewart did in a way. He's going somewhere where it's kind of a turnkey, where he wants to go, feels like he can hop in and go win. And if you can't do that, we know how Kyle is when that happens.
Well, not to get too far out in the weeds, Jordan, but there was a subtle change as far as the bow tie brigade is concerned just a couple of years ago. And Andy Petrie was the one that carried the flag about it. And that's in sharing engineering, sharing information, and pretty much combining Hendrick Motorsports and Trackhouse and Richard Childress Racing. So that leads me to wonder, do you believe that maybe Jim Campbell is going to be the cat wrangler in this deal?
I think it would behoove Chevrolet to be that kind of have that kind of role. And I think Toyota did that very, very well when they were with, or they still are, with Joe Gibbs Racing and Kyle Busch, and they were always involved. I think it's good to have somebody like that. If Jim is up to it, then I think it's a good thing. And we'll see. If this is going to be a challenge, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works. And I think you kind of raise another good point, which is at Joe Gibbs Racing, you always knew that Kyle Busch and that team was a priority, number one priority, right? I think you can't say the same thing about Chevrolet. I mean, they've got all of Hendrick Motorsports. They've got Trackhouse. How does Richard Childress Racing fit in all of that? They certainly aren't going to be number one by themselves if they're number one at all.
I think when you and I were filling in one day, I actually projected, wouldn't it be ironic if, because Toyota poached Tyler Reddick from Chevrolet and from Richard Childress, if Richard Childress repaid the action by poaching Kyle Busch? Funny how just conversation can become reality.
It is. I mean, in a way, it feels like a trade could happen. And, like, hey, we'll give you Kyle Busch, you take Tyler Reddick, and we all move on, or merry way. And I think that honestly was one of the big takeaways from today was about this. Like, we already knew the Kyle Busch piece of it, right? Like, we knew. And to me, it's now what happens with Tyler Reddick and how does RCR make this work? They are adamant today, like, hey, we're going to have 3 full-time charter teams next year, and Tyler's going to drive one of those cars. Okay, that's all well and good, but then you got to go pay for a charter or lease a charter. You got to hire personnel. You got to bring in resources, equipment, everything else. Plus, you got to pay Kyle Busch a salary. Plus, you still got to pay Reddick. We're talking about a lot of money here. Is Richard Childress Racing in a position to commit that kind of money towards 3 cars? I don't know. I don't know their books. But from the outside, it seems like it would be better off for RCR financially and better for Reddick for his career, and better for Toyota and 2311 Racing if they all just came together and said, hey, let's figure this out one way or another. And because there's Reddick going back to RCR next year feels like a 0-win scenario.
A little bit later, I'm going to be visiting with your Fox peer, Bob Pockris, and we're going to talk a little bit about, a lot of the timeline. But you mentioned Reddick, and I want to look forward to 2023 as it applies to the entire NASCAR community, because I think this has a ripple effect. It isn't a giant boulder thrown into the NASCAR lake, but it's one of sufficient skip that is going to have ripples across the industry, don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. Because now you're taking a title contender, an annual title contender in Kyle Busch, and you're putting him over on a team that hasn't won a championship since 1994, and realistically hasn't challenged for a title since 2000. Oh man, what was it? 10, 11, 12, with Kevin Harvick, 2013. So, instantly that should elevate RCR up. And that is a good thing for the sport. This is a legacy team, Hall of Fame owner. There's a lot of brand identity with that team. So that is a good thing. And it puts in a lot of dynamics for next year, right? All of a sudden, Ty Gibbs is out of the equation. He theoretically, I shouldn't say theoretically, he more than likely is going to be Kyle Busch's successor at Joe Gibbs Racing, right? Taking his spot. So that takes away a dynamic young driver and the Toyota side of things. Well, Martin Truex Jr.'s contract's up in a year. We just went through whether he was going to retire or not retire. I don't think he's going to be back for 24. It seems like next year is going to be it for him. Who replaces him? Because all of a sudden that becomes the next story to follow, right? It's all of these different dominoes that kind of you look at, and there's no ready-made prospect in the Toyota developmental ranks that you say that's a kid who's ready for the Cup Series. They don't have that yet. So that's something that kind of falls out of this, that you start looking at going, okay, because if Kyle resigns with Joe Gibbs Racing, Ty Gibbs probably stays in the Xfinity series, and then he replaces Truex. Well, that scenario is out the window now.
So we know what we know. What is it that we don't know that are going to become, some of the stories that you and others will be bird dogging as we go through the playoffs here?
When, pertaining to Kyle Busch, when did it become known to him that he wasn't going to return back to Joe Gibbs Racing? I've been asking him that question really for the last month and change, and I know others have as well. And every week it's the same thing. Has Joe Gibbs told you anything? And the answer was no. Well,
wait a minute though. It started with Ask Joe Gibbs.
Yeah, it did start with Ask Joe Gibbs, and then it was a no. So, when did it become very apparent to Kyle, that it wasn't an option? And was that conveyed to him directly? Hey, this isn't happening. You need to look somewhere else. Or, hey, sorry, we don't have a spot here for you. When did that conversation happen? Or it maybe been a thing of Kyle realizing on his own and reading the room and saying, hey, this isn't going to work. It's pretty obvious. They don't need to tell me this. I'm going to go and figure out my own destiny here. And then the other question is, throughout this process, you and I've talked about this on the air, is there was a lot of other teams in play. How close did he come to a deal with one of those other teams? And at any point, was he far down the road? How far down the road was he?
Well, and then the elephant in the room, and look, you professionals that go at it like a pit bull with a piece of meat, is, did he take a pay cut? If he took a pay cut, how much of a pay cut? And oh, by the way, what does that portend down the road? Are we seeing a readjustment of what teams are willing to pay top flight drivers?
That's a really good point. We're always curious about what everybody makes, and I kind of heard the number for what Joe Gibbs Racing maybe offered him or what Kyle Busch was looking for. My understanding is that he got a pretty sweet deal at Richard Childress Racing. I don't know the number. I don't even really know the range, so I don't feel comfortable saying that. But I feel like he got a pretty sweet deal there. And I think it's important to note, as NASCAR goes to this next TV deal that's going to kick in 25 and negotiations are going to start next year in earnest, the expectation is that money should be going up, and then that will trickle down to the teams. Will have more money, and then maybe they will be able to spend more money on drivers' salaries, which a lot of drivers will be very happy about, because there has been a market correction over the last 5 or 6 years where a lot of veteran drivers, big names, have had to take pay cuts or have been squeezed out altogether because they weren't, there was just economically didn't make sense for them to stick around anymore at the salaries they were making. We'll see. This could be the first, though, where hey, Kyle Busch got a big deal, and other drivers who are coming up, Kyle Larson's a free agent next year. Maybe they are in line for a big pay raise themselves.
Yeah, and it was kind of interesting listening to Richard talking, and I thought the best line of the day is, well, the contract was easy, but I want to thank the attorneys. And then he corrected himself, and he said, well, no, because they'll get paid. Yeah. But this did happen very, very quickly, according to your sources, right?
Yeah, I mean, the conversations between RCR and Kyle started back in mid-July, but really heated up over the last couple of weeks. And really over the last week or so was really when it intensified, and it became pretty apparent that it was down to RCR and another team. And at that point, Kyle had to kind of make a decision, and he chose job security, multi-year deal over a 1-year deal, possibly longer term at a different organization.
And now he has an option contract with Richard Childress Racing for his son, Braxton. Yeah. Always got to bring the family, and you know that.
Absolutely. I mean, it sounds cheesy, but Kyle always said, hey, I always envisioned myself racing alongside my son at Kyle Busch Motorsports, under the Toyota banner. That doesn't seem to be the case anymore. That was a smart move. It's kind of cheesy, and it's kind of playing to the crowd a little bit, but that's a really good move by RC to say, hey, Braxton, here's a lifetime contract. Make everybody feel welcome, right?
Well, it's what Rick Hendrick did with the second generation Bill Elliott's kid when Chase Elliott was just getting started. So stranger things have not happened. It's been there. Listen, I appreciate, on a very, very busy day, you carving out some time. Looking forward to an opportunity to meet with you and be substitute co-host again down the road on Sirius XM. But in the meantime, I'm also going to look forward to tapping into your knowledge periodically here inside the wind tunnel. Thanks so much, Jordan.
Always a pleasure, Jack. Anytime. Thank you so much.